Apparently, religion is making a bit of a comeback. This fits a historical pattern, and it is not good news for our heroes. Hello lovelies, picked up a few new subs, so it's time to purge by being me. I'm an atheist. I have been for most of my life. Ever since I figured out that Santa wasn't real, the whole God thing didn't really stick. And I will probably be an atheist for the rest of my life. Unless that is something truly spectacular happens, like God descending from the clouds to apologise for the last few millennia of radio silence and mismanagement, or being kicked in the head by a horse. But I'm not an atheist because it's edgy or rebellious, or because it aligns with my ideology, or because I think Richard Dawkins is a dreamy hunk. I'm an atheist because religious and mythological explanations simply don't work. They either fall apart under the slightest scrutiny, or they're not even wrong because they don't even make a proposition, really, which is kind of worse. The problem is that they're just not demonstrably true. They're not supported by any evidence whatsoever. Not one iota, not one scintilla, not one minute fragment of evidence. Not one Planck length of evidence. And so there's no reason to think that they ever will be. It's been a very long time. If there were a supernatural force out there tinkering with the mechanisms of the universe, then it's done an awfully good job of hiding its fingerprints, despite supposedly having a finger in every pie from rainbows to ichneumon wasps to childhood cancer. And yet, religion persists. Parasitically. Because people seem to want certainty more than they want truth, even if that certainty has no foundation. Or some of them hide their brains under the warm duvet of a Petersonian metaphorical truth, which isn't true. They want to feel right more than they want to be right, and there's an entire Christo-industrial complex of priests, prophets and pundits willing to sell them that comfort. For a tithe, of course, that's only reasonable. Every few generations, it seems, society loses its collective goddamn mind a bit and goes through what I'd like to call a romantic relapse. Romanticism was the 19th century artistic and philosophical movement. It was born as a reaction to the Enlightenment, all that tedious rationality, progress, natural philosophy, science, evidence. Learning how germs worked, things like that. Tiresome. The Romantics didn't want any truth, they wanted feeling. They wanted awe and mystery and the sublime, a sense of wonder, a sense of something vast and terrifying just beyond human comprehension, which is beautiful stuff in art and poetry and fiction. You can feel all your big feels there, but it's less good when you start applying those sorts of things to politics. And honestly, I don't know why they couldn't see all of those wonderful things in the Enlightenment and what it was revealing itself. And Romanticism is kind of harmless in and of itself, even artistically inspiring and so on. It can be a good thing, but it has always had this dark twin. The same emotional impulse that makes you weep at a Turner painting also makes you susceptible to the idea that your nation, your race, your faith, or your destiny is somehow special, that there is this grand narrative somehow, and that you're the protagonist of the story rather than a speck on a speck in a speck in a speck in an infinite multiverse. And that's fascism. Fascism is romanticism with jackboots. It's myth dressed up as ideology. It's a nationalist fever dream about destiny and sacrifice and blood and blah 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 blah. It replaces rational policy with emotional theatrics and grand proclamations. It doesn't ask you to think. Thinking is hard. It asks you to feel deeply about things that aren't true or don't exist, or to believe assertions that they make that simply aren't true. And religion fits perfectly into that. It's the original romantic system, the idea that the world is governed by hidden forces, that beauty and tragedy have cosmic meaning, that suffering is noble if you do it for the right cause, and that everything would be great if only everyone forcibly believed the same thing that you do. It's the same wiring that makes people cry at opera that also makes them cheer on the jihad or the crusade or a totalitarian government taking away your food. It turns the human and the humane into the monstrous and the inhumane. The Nazis dabbled in occult nonsense and pseudo-Christian mythology, and were very much wrapped up in Christianity. Franco wrapped himself in the robes of the church. Mussolini cut deals with the Vatican. Even Stalin's regime had its own quasi-religious cult of personality with its saints, martyrs and holy relics, such as Lenin's embalmed corpse. Despite Marxism positioning itself against religion, despite purges and jealousy of the ability to control others, even Stalin came to an accommodation with the Orthodox Church. The point here is that faith, any faith, usefully defined as a belief without or in spite of evidence to the contrary, is a ready-made framework of sorts for obedience. It teaches people to submit, to believe despite the facts, to trust authority without evidence, to stop thinking, click. And once that reflex is installed, it doesn't much matter whether the high priest wears a cassock or a military uniform with a bunch of completely earned medals. Fast forward to the present, and here we are again. The pendulum has swung away from reason and back towards mysticism, turbocharged by engagement algorithms, clickable paranoia, bot farms and badly steered AI. People no longer trust expertise, evidence or institutions, even when it has literally saved their life. Nah, they trust vibes. Being stuck with a needle feels bad, and they don't understand vaccines, and so they easily latch on to the idea that it must somehow be bad as a way to excuse not wanting to get one. They'll find plenty of exploitative bellends online willing to tell them what they already intuit, wrongly, that it's bad. Understanding things is hard work, often long-winded and often boring and difficult. It also goes against your instincts quite often, your intelligence and conscious thought, but your instincts simply aren't set up for 21st century life. We live in an age where someone can look at a mountain of peer-reviewed studies and say, well, that's just like your opinion, man, before disappearing into a rabbit hole of YouTube preachers, TikTok prophets and supplement salesmen. It's Romanticism reborn, only this time it's digitized, fucking retarded, and an amoral social media corporatocracy doesn't care to act responsibly or counter the effect, just to profit from it. And once again, religion seems to be finding its footing in the chaos. According to some recent opinion polls, younger people in the States are turning back to religion. It's not really happening anywhere else, and I am deeply suspicious of the research, but colloquially, I have noticed some people going back to church or expressing their faith without any shame, shall we say, and trying to press it onto others more and more. I think that helps fuel the current moral crusade that seems to be going on. It justifies it for the right in the way that radfem ideology and so on does for the left, unfortunately. Evangelicals in the US are frothing themselves into an eschatological frenzy, convinced that the apocalypse is both inevitable and desirable, somehow, to the point that they are actually actively trying to make it happen. Islamists across the Middle East justify barbarism through divine sanction. Israel. There's Hindu nationalism in India and Buddhist nationalism in Myanmar, which wraps modern fascism in saffron robes. And the Orthodox Church has become Putin's cheerleader for war. in a way that they were too ashamed to do, even though they backed up Stalin back in the day. There is a reason religion is stereotypically the enemy in so much fiction, despite constantly professing to do good. Because the collective noun for priests should be an hypocrisy. It's all the same pathology, an emotional retreat into myth when reality feels too complicated or it's too hard. And make no mistake, this post-truth condition isn't just stupidity or ignorance, and it is important to separate those two concepts. Ignorance is forgivable until it becomes willful. But it's not just that. I think it's also a symptom of exhaustion. Modernity is hard work, modernism is hard work, science, democracy, applying reason, critical thinking to everything in your life requires constant maintenance and practice, particularly when you're surrounded by ever more sophisticated bullshit. You have to read, you have to think, you have to cross-check, you have to question, you have to update your priors. None of the old systems of gatekeeping that said this person is qualified to talk about this topic remain in place. That's both good and bad, but at the moment I think we're feeling more of the bad. Now, a lot of people just can't be arsed with all that. Religion plays at these things, but it's a facade. Apologetics isn't thinking, it's formalised versions of post hoc rationalisation of nonsense. So instead of all that work, people reach for something easier, something pre-chewed. Religion offers that: cosmic narratives, a moral compass, an afterlife, and an enemy, all bundled together in one convenient, off-the-shelf eternal package. Never mind that the narrative is wrong, the moral compass inevitably causes harm, there's no afterlife, and that the enemy is imagined, and therefore can be projected on anyone or anything. It's convenient. It's the Big Mac of lifestyle philosophy. People talk a lot about this crisis of meaning these days, as though it's some mysterious modern malaise. But it's really just what happens when you remove the training wheels of rote belief and have to ride reality unassisted. Without religion, there is no cosmic script. In reality, there is no cosmic script. There is no celestial audience, no divine plan. You're just one slightly clever monkey on a spinning rock trying to make sense of it all. And that can feel terrifying and overwhelming and Lovecraftian until you realise that it is also something that is liberating. But a lot of people never make it to that part. They stop at the terror of their own insignificance in the grand scheme of things, which doesn't mean you're insignificant, because the scheme of things is also local. But that's where faith swoops in, and self-help gurus, all smiles and platitudes offering to fill the void, love-bombing the vulnerable and hate-bombing the skeptical, sometimes literally. The problem is there isn't really a void there in the first place. Religion just convinces you that there is one, and it doesn't fill the void that it creates with meaning, it fills it with noise and repetition and ritual, and eventually a kind of intellectual reflex that doesn't actually engage your conscious mind. It has ritual and hierarchy and platitudes and nonsense and behaviours that sound profound but aren't. And because it's built on an illusion of lies and well-meaning ignorance, it cannot help but eventually collapse under its own contradictions and lack of a foundation. Anything that is not built on truth, or the closest approximation we can get to it, is eventually going to fail, necessarily, because reality always trumps whatever it is that you believe. Eventually, and messily. Every major religion is full of fractures, sects, schisms, reforms, precisely because it can't keep its stories straight. Reality has a way of grinding falsehood into dust given enough time, but it can be a very painful, violent process. That's why religions work so hard to police thought, get 'em while they're young, control speech and demonize dissent. Because once people start asking questions, the whole thing rapidly unravels. In fairness, there are positive things that people get from religion. I would say it's in spite of the religion rather than because of the religion. You may disagree. But some people get a sense of community. They get support. They can tap into charity or contribute to their community. They get a sense of belonging, even though this is just one religiously screened part of their community. If you're poor or lonely or desperate, then the church might feed you when no one else will. Of course, they might insist that you pray or convert or are baptized or whatever else, but they will feed you. Let's not let the rest overshadow that. But the thing is, so will most anarchist groups, humanist associations, the Church of Satan, and many others. You can get the help without the side order of guilt and evangelism. If your government has abandoned you, the mosque or the temple might step in, but so will secular charities. There's genuine social utility attached to religions, but that's not magic. It's not a result of the religion. Plenty of people act charitably without religion. It's just people helping people, just reframed into superstition. You don't need the superstition to be good to one another. Atheists are as generous in donating money, once you control for tithing, to charities, and are more generous in terms of loaning their labour and their expertise to charitable efforts. Good people are good people regardless, but bad people are enabled by faith. It's no coincidence that the most religious countries tend to also have some of the weakest welfare systems, because they feel like they can leave it up to God, I suppose. The United States, for example, is religious as hell, and also has about the worst social safety net of a modern first world nation. It has the social safety net of a burning trampoline, where all the metal edges have been filed down to points. It's a cultural bargain, I suppose. The government refuses to take care of you and outsources compassion to the church. And in return, you hand over your weekends, your mind, and 10% of your wages to Joel Osteen or some other similar horrible figure. That might explain why religion has such staying power in America. It's not about theology, it's about community. It replaces the common good and welfare with thoroughly inadequate philanthropy. It's about survival in a society that worships greed but calls it freedom, and religion buys into that and offers you a sop for your conscience, while the preacher buys a third private jet. But you can get all of these things, all of these positive things elsewhere in your life. Community doesn't have to come with dogma. Support doesn't have to come from scripture. You can build humanist organizations, mutual aid networks, online communities. You can start a community pantry on your lawn. Right? Even gaming groups help each other out. Right? That is what community does. It's not what churches do. You don't have to pretend that there is a bearded skyman keeping score. Just do good to do good. You don't need heaven to be kind. Unfortunately, what it seems you need is to have suffered a little bit of hardship yourself. Voltaire once said, or at least paraphrased, "Those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities." He popularised the phrase. And you can see this playing out right now in real time. Millions of American Christians have convinced themselves that Donald Trump, a twice divorced, thrice indicted, adulterous casino mogul with all the spiritual depth of whatever the opposite of a puddle is, a mountain, I suppose, is God's chosen vessel rather than the Antichrist. They call him a tool of the Lord, which is, to be fair, half right, I suppose. This is a man who embodies none of the virtues that Christianity likes to claim it has: humility, honesty, compassion, mercy, and all of the ones that it tends to actually have: hatred, fear, othering, and hypocrisy. And yet the evangelicals flock to him because he tells them what they want to hear: that they're righteous, that they're besieged, that their enemies are somehow evil, and evil in a proper, cosmic sense. They mistake cruelty for strength and hypocrisy for authenticity. They will work themselves into a lather over an imaginary child trafficking ring hidden away behind the facade of Comet Pizza, but will turn a blind eye to Trump's seemingly obvious involvement in a human trafficking ring. Peculiar, don't you think? When faith convinces you that reality doesn't matter, you can justify anything. Torture, mass murder, climate denial, breaking up families, shipping them to different countries, theocracy, all of it can be wrapped in the warm blanket of divine purpose, which excuses it all. Take the ongoing horror in Gaza, for example. There are people, not a few, millions, who think that this is all necessary and for the good. That it is good, even, because their prophecy says that Israel must be whole and drenched in blood before Jesus can clock back in and get to work. So they watch slaughter and they see salvation. They don't mourn, they cheer. Kill them all, let God sort them out. Because faith has switched off, click, the part of the brain that recognizes suffering as bad in and of itself by couching it in a greater good that never really manifests. It's what happens when you surrender your mind to myth or completely to ideology. It's how Ayn Rand excuses the most horrendous selfishness by convincing people somehow that this is actually good for society in the longer term. The unthinkable becomes holy or excusable for the most important cause in the universe, people's souls and the ascendancy of God. The absurd becomes sacred and reason becomes sin. Shut him up. He knows something. So if religions are lies and nihilism is unbearable, though it doesn't have to be, it depends on your interpretation, but then what's left? Meaning, real meaning, isn't found. It isn't off the peg. It's made. All of those religions that provide those off-the-peg meanings have been made by somebody, but they're not necessarily very good. But you can make your own. You can build your meaning through relationships, creativity, discovery and interpretation, through small acts of kindness and curiosity that ripple outwards and make existence slightly less awful. Science doesn't rob the world of wonder, it multiplies it. The fact that we can look up into a night sky and know that stars are nuclear furnaces fusing hydrogen in a dance that began billions of years ago is far more magnificent than any verse in Genesis in any language. You don't need to confuse reality with mysticism to find beauty in it, or to restore mysticism by incorrectly invoking quantum the other way around. You just need to look properly. The patterns in chaos, the order in randomness, the improbable luck of being a conscious being itself, all of it is miraculous in the truest sense of the word. Yes, as in a very, very rare event. Not supernatural. Natural. And that's enough. That's more than enough. Yeah, it takes a little bit more work. It takes imagination. It takes a fragment of courage to accept that there is no cosmic safety net, no eternal after-party. But what you gain in return is honesty and truth, a solid foundation for whatever meaning you then construct, and freedom to build your own purpose without waiting for permission from some dude in a dress. You can love without fear of hell and die without fear of judgment. That's meaning enough. It really, honestly is. Now, the good news is that this religious revival probably isn't going to spread far beyond the American border. Here in the UK, when someone starts shouting about Jesus in the high street, most people just sidestep them like a particularly aggressive pigeon and get back to queuing at Greg's. Over here, the evangelical theatrics just look ridiculous, as when some Christian fanatics associated with UKIP, of all things, tried to block off Soho, which hasn't been the centre of adult entertainment in London since at least the 90s. Our cultural immune system kicks in. Maybe it's the drizzle, maybe it's the incessant sarcasm, Maybe it's our inability to take anything seriously and to find sincerity kind of cringe. But the idea of British Trumpian megachurches is about as likely as a mosh pit at a Women's Institute meeting. That said, we're not immune to the broader disease, the anti-intellectualism, the conspiracy fetish, the racism, the populist tantrums, but faith in the old supernatural sense doesn't have much pull here anymore. Our gods are nostalgia for the war and gossip, not Yahweh and Christ. And honestly, that is progress of a sort. Familiarity breeds contempt. It may even be the separation of church and state in the US that has perpetuated the influence of religion there, rather than us incorporating it and therefore becoming contemptuous of it. While America seems intent on speedrunning the fall of Rome with Bible verses and TikTok, I hope that the rest of us are going to learn from them. The backlash to Trumpian fascism, to willful ignorance, to theocratic stupidity is already brewing, and we can hope that that goes international. Despite what these more recent surveys are suggesting, over the longer term, people as a whole are leaving religion in droves over the longer term, whatever this short-term stuff is. Science, art and secularism still have their champions. Now, I worry a little that new atheism has faltered, that people who are so resistant to bullshit in the form of religion succumbed to bullshit in the form of ideology, radical feminism, all of these sorts of things. I know I've lost some of you there, but can we all agree that whatever the ideology, some people take it too far or believe nonsense, and that skepticism is applicable there? Okay, good. All on the same page again. But humanity, this stuff usually swings back again. You know, the romantic delusions collapse, the tyrants fall, the priests go back to their monasteries to sulk and masturbate over icons of the Virgin Mary. Humanity remembers, briefly, for a while, that thinking tends to work better than praying, and that's when we tend to make societal progress. And then, of course, we forget it all again, and this whole thing happens over and over. But for now, for this cycle, I think maybe reason has a fighting chance, still. Maybe. That's as positive as I get. So yeah, meaning is fragile, faith is dangerous, reality is still beautiful regardless, and we've still got each other, our stories, our questions, our communities, the things we share, and our capacity, if we want, to make things just that little bit better, even if it's just by understanding them, because right action can only form and follow from right information, and that, oh my lovelies, is enough. Zang.
In the grim, dark depths of a grim, dark mine, there's a grim, dark man with a grim, dark mind, and his grim, dark pen spends its grim, dark time scratching grim, dark tales for his grim, dark kind.
The gallows is cold and the gibbet is lonely. We'll make things hard for you here.